Hi, everybody. My name is Monica, and I'm with my colleague Theo, and we are from MTLGreen. And today we have a workshop for you about tackling the climate crisis, but essentially how to take a systemic approach towards your projects that you'll be working on during the AI Hackathon and to really analyze their sustainability in addressing the climate crisis. So who is MTLGreen? MTLGreen started in Montreal since 2016 based on the public consultation, the largest one in Montreal related to the carbon footprint done in our city and the reduction of greenhouse gases. From there, from this initiative, it's been already 5 years in the making that we approach eco-entrepreneurs and citizens of Montreal to bridge their worlds together and getting them engaged, network, but also really rethink their strategies and investing their time and projects into initiatives that really have a true impact on the environment and on their footprint in their city. So what are the types of things MTLGreen does? We do a variety of things, but here let me bring you back to our vision, mission, and values. MTLGreen is made by Montrealers, for Montrealers, but also by just any citizen. And essentially we privilege innovation and experience learning, where everybody has the power to take forward any element that might be meaningful and impactful on their city. So any type of green enthusiasts, whether professionals of the generations or of any approach, if you want to make a difference, MTLGreen can connect you to the right people and investing your decisions, making the right choices on your daily habits. So what type of events does MTLGreen do? We do a variety of things. These are just a snapshot of what we've done in the past. We run competitions where we bring the concepts of sustainability to anyone who wants to push and bring their potential forward on sustainable action. We also do workshops where you get to meet eco-entrepreneurs and get to shape and adapt their strategies forward to be more sustainable and impactful. We also give learning experience where we give tours on the life cycle of different impacts that we have. We also recently with the COVID have taken a more virtual approach to really have a feedback show and also a learning eco habits show where you can really learn, but also provide direct feedback with those who want to make a difference, making it a community effort to play it forward. We do many campaigns to engage with other partners in the community. And finally, it's a chance to meet like-minded people such as yourselves. But what are we actually doing in this hackathon and what can we bring to you is essentially a way to collaborate efficiently, but also to think how can your project can make a real difference for sustainability and not just tackling the surface of the iceberg. So today, my colleague Theo and I will give you more insights on how can you approach the 3 elements of climate change and make your project successful and sustainable for generations to come.
Thank you, Monica. This is great. So I'm happy to be with you guys and give you an overview of methodology for tackling the climate crisis that is applicable in all kinds of different complex system, complex project. It's a high-level strategic framework. It's going to provide you a common language, if you will, to be able to better frame, address, plan, validate, test your project hypothesis or the problem you're working on, and also embed a more systemic understanding of how it relates to the whole of the globe. So here's an overview, framing of the system and challenge, the presentation of the strategic framework. We'll do a little exercise as well as to see your ability to understand what we mean by the 3 different approaches to climate change. And at the end, we'll have a strategic mapping and then how it can foster collaboration. So first and foremost, you've probably seen already the three main approaches to tackle the climate crisis. They've been announced in the marketing material, and all challenges are framed around one or two of these approaches. So you have mitigation. So what does that mean is how can we change our approach today and tomorrow to move towards net zero and sustainability? So it really means like getting more efficient in terms of energy usage, reducing our emissions in that sense as well, and then creating systemic, what we call systemic value throughout the value chain. And the next one is adaptation. How can we adapt to now that we know, I mean, we're gonna feel and experience the consequences of climate change that is happening rather fast in this era. And that's kind of what we're going to be looking deeper into this presentation as well. And finally, how can we inform and keep track of the challenge and the progress we're making in tackling it? So those are the three main approach, and they all are important. Although I'd say mitigation is the more urgent and more important at this point, because we want to reduce our emission drastically within the next decade and the next 30 years to meet the 2050 net zero goal that we've set up at the level of the UN, but also I think that many organizations are moving in that direction more and more. So this is going to be part of our day-to-day now, I think, since we've made this this Accord of Paris, right? So another way, here's a little diagram to understand what mitigation and adaptation and how they relate to it. So simply mitigation is reducing emission, and that also means that not producing them in the first place. And might also mean capturing some of the emissions that already been that have already been
Implemented.
Yeah, emitted, sorry. And then adaptation is reducing harm, if you will. So finding ways that, you know, because of the disruption in the system, finding ways to maybe plan for migration pattern or plan for better building, better infrastructure and so on. So there's a lot of different ways that can be addressed. Here's another a view on an example of mitigation and adaptation. They overlap, obviously. And they work in tandem, if you will. They are both important. And as I said, mitigation is more urgent because we want to cut down on greenhouse gas emission in the next decade and forward. Now let's run a little quiz, and Monica will help you with this.
Yes.
And just to give a sort of learning element to this workshop, so you get involved as well. So try to guess with her what the questions, the answer to the questions are.
Yes, thank you, Theo. So yes, those are great concepts, but what's really important is to really associate and be able to detect what type of climate approach different scenarios take. So let's do a few examples, and you guys can try to guess which one of the three approaches, mitigation, adaptation, or awareness, each of these examples correspond to. So let's start with the first one here. Case A is related to tracking endangered species using a non-invasive method. So here, imagine a scenario, and this is a real scenario if you guys are interested to read more about it, where WildTrack uses drones that are AI powered to really capture what are the behaviors and pathways and footprints that wildlife is taking in places where endangered species are more and more endangered and disappearing. So by using this method, we don't step into their territory, but all the information that we can gather is taken from the air, and in order to prevent, disrupting their environment. So what type of climate approach do you think this one is? Can you guys guess? Well, let's give you the answer. The answer is adaptation. Why is it adaptation? if you recall, my colleague Theo mentioned that it's ways how can we adapt to the outcomes we're already facing. So in this case, the species are becoming more and more endangered. So we're changing our method to understand their behavior, to track where can they survive and increase their survival. So we're finding ways that don't go into traditional methods where we walk into their space could disrupt their behaviors. So we're working with nature to gather that data in order to better adapt to their space. Now let's see the next example. Case B. How can you imagine your country if it was using 100% renewable energy? So here it's a game of forecasting and prediction. So let's say if you are in Canada, like Theo and I are, you want to imagine what would it look like if all our provinces would be using renewable energy and not just a portion of our country? And how can it change perhaps the decisions that we're making based on seeing the potential of what it could be? So can you guys guess which approach this is? Mitigation, adaptation, or awareness? This one might be an easier one. Well, the answer is awareness. And here the answer is simple. It is because we're using data in this sense to influence, but also be more critical about the actions we're taking today. So it's a method to influence, but also empower us to take better actions by seeing what it could bring to us. All right, a third example, case C. It's how can you improve the precision of agriculture that is done on rooftops, but also you want to reduce your footprint, land waste, and any other type of human error that can come into traditional farming methods. So here, the case is robots that use machine learning and software where they can help farmers to predict which crops are going to grow better in this or that area. It can use predictions in terms of algorithms on which crops will generate more outcome, more yield. And in that case, you can reduce fertilizers and really optimize and almost shift the way agriculture is being done in that sense. So here, which approach do you think this one would be? Mitigation, adaptation, or awareness? The answer is mitigation. And like Theo said, this is the hardest one to approach because it's rethinking the way we would do things. In this example, we changed the traditional approach of farming and we're really rebuilding a new process that's resilient, where we reduce the negative impacts by reducing fertilizers, reducing waste, and leveraging AI and technology to really move that forward. So this is a case where we get more with less resources being used here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Monica. That was fun. So now you get an understanding of what mitigation, adaptation, and awareness means in terms of climate change approach. Let's go a bit deeper in how we can understand the system in which we're engaging with at a really high level first, to understand how we became unsustainable. Because sustainability, if you want, is something that is natural in nature. And we're not that we're not natural ourselves, but that we've sort of like reached certain point where things became unsustainable. And that's what we're going to try to understand. So here's a really high level frame to help us think through in terms of planning and complex system. And it's really not it's not that complex of a slide, right? It's just 5 levels and some questions. And it seems maybe it's almost like trivial. And why is this even like useful? Well, in some ways we have to think of, naturally we do tend to think around these questions when we're engaging in an organization, but even individually, like what is important to us? Like what does success mean to us, basically, is a question we ask ourselves often. What is happening now? How is the system constituted is another question we ask ourselves. And we often do gap analysis in that regard. And the other question we ask ourselves is, how do we decide and prioritize to get to that success, right? And then what do we do actually concretely to get to that success? And additionally, what are the tools that we need in order to track, in order to improve, in order to collaborate, and so on. So that's the high level framework. It's a guideline, it's a methodology, if you will, that helps us think and act together strategically. You can think of it this way. The other aspect I want to touch upon when I talk about system, I tend to differentiate between three types of complexities. And they all are interdependent. So that's what these little arrows on the side mean. They're all interdependent and all influence each other. And this big arrow there, you can see is the evolutionary process over a really long period of time. So if you imagine how the universe became from matter to eventually life forms, and then us, more complex life form, who are able of creating meaning and intention with language and so on. So those three types of complexity, if you will, they behave differently. Even though I say behavioral, well, you can think of behavioral as life form, biology, right? And all of these different types of complexity, physics is more simple, behavioral is a bit more complex, and meaning even more complex because they behave differently. They have different contingencies. And I think it makes it interesting to think of complexity in those three types and as a way for us to relate from multiple different disciplines. And they all are important in how they can relate to each other. And one other way you can think of this is you have at the basic level, you have material economics, so energy and material flow. And then the other layer is behavioral economics, so how people behave, what is it how do they provide for their needs and so on. And then at the third level is what people value, right? So it's another way to frame this. Now, finally, another important aspect is moving from a silo approach, which we tend to be kind of engaged in all disciplines. Like most disciplines are focusing on their own prerogative, their own languaging, their own special terminology, and so on. And that's creating a siloed view of reality, if you will. So it becomes important to think together, and the system become an expert as we're able together to think and collaborate and frame and strategize together. We become more aware and capable of addressing complex issues. And that's why this is important as well, because the level of the issues we're dealing with today, as complex as they are, we often refer to them as wicked problems, require multiple different perspectives. And it's also another aspect of diversity is having more people relating to the same challenges with multiple different perspectives allows us to enable change, enable creativity, innovation, and leads to better solution and more systemic resilience. And another, framing is a big part of this, and sort of asking important question here to help us understand what's happening at each level of the guiding methodology and how we tackle it. And one of the things I'll be presenting today is backcasting from vision, which is probably something you might have heard of, maybe not. It's backcasting is sort of the opposite of forecasting, is looking where we want to go, looking at from that lens to what's happening today in current reality, and then assessing from that perspective, from where we want to be in the future. And we do it from principle in this methodology. The other aspect there for sustainability is understanding that part of the strategy is to substitute the types of vehicle we use to meet our needs. So any kind of output that we generate from the business or the government or any types of organization creating some kind of value, and finding a different mean that is more sustainable to meet that need, right? And dematerialization is another important component. Imagine if today all of humans were still burning wood to cook their food, would have a problem. And so dematerialization is something we've been doing for many thousands of years now, using less material to provide for needs. And actually fossil fuel was one of that dematerialization. Now we need to move to the next level, using even less material, because there's a ceiling of how much material we can have and use at any given time in the cycle of or ecology or system, the biosphere. So that's that. And so before we go further, I just want to do like sort of biosphere life cycle system 101 to remind ourselves how the system functions when it's sustainable, right? So the system is open to energy, receive 10,000 times more energy from the sun that we can capture in any given day. Photosynthesis and biology organizes matter. It creates life form like us. We have slow geological cycles that over time create changing conditions, but they go to a slow, rather slow cycle speed. And we have sedimentation and mineralization that generates the, if you will, the biosphere's ability to maintain life conditions over long periods of time. Closed system with respect to matter, so nothing disappears, and then everything transforms into another component in the biosphere, and at the same time, everything disperses. And so that's why we have, when we burn fossil fuel, it disperses in the biosphere, it stays there for a long period of time, and then we end up with greenhouse gases. The other point I'm going to make here, and also it's self-organized. So over a long period of time, in maybe 100,000 years, well, the planet would adapt to these changing conditions and find another sort of pattern for sustaining whatever life form happens to be at that moment. Finally, what happens today, what we've generated over maybe the last 200 years more so with the advance of industrialization across the globe, is we generated 3 high-level sort of inhibitor to sustainability, if you will. We call them systemic conditions for violation of the system's conditions. So one of them is physically inhibiting natural's ability to run cycles. So anything that comes to basically over-harvesting, monoculture, disruption of topsoil for agriculture, overfishing. So physical mean, basically using physical mean to disrupt natural cycle at a scale that is so large that is impacting the whole biosphere. And also introducing relatively large flows of materials from the Earth's crust. So that's what it means when we burn fossil fuel. The problem is actually not that we extract it, it's how we extract it and what we do with it. If we burn it, then that's when it's become a problem. If we create plastic and the plastic gets everywhere in nature and stops cycles from natural cycle from running naturally or efficiently or healthily, let's say, then that's when it becomes a problem. If we are able to keep that into a loop where it doesn't disrupt the system, then it's not a problem. Then the other thing we do is we introduce persistent compounds into nature. So I think we have over 500,000 new compounds that are foreign to nature that nature doesn't know how to reintegrate and use as part of its natural cycle. So it's not, it's not organic matter, so it's not able to be reintroduced naturally into the life cycle. So then it creates toxicity in certain areas in the food chain. It creates potentially disease that we're not even necessarily able to understand because there's so many of those compounds everywhere. So those are the 3 basic system violation that we've generated over the last couple centuries, and that's what we need to address to tackle sustainability. Now, why is this happening? Well, basically because humanity is trying to meet their need, right? So at the same time that we're doing this, sometimes we're creating obstacles for people to meet their need in all kinds of different ways. So that's the social aspect of sustainability. People need to be able to adapt to the current reality to meet their need in a way that they're not contradicting with those 3 high-level principles that I've just described. So to give also another sort of understanding of what is going on here, and I've touched upon it before, the problem is not the disruption per se, because disruption is actually part of the system's dynamic. I mean, there's been many extinction phases in the evolution of planet Earth. There's been mini cycle of different life form. The problem is that it's never been done such rapidly consciously, as far as we know, right? So if it was happening over a longer period of time, the system probably, and the humans and other species would have had more of a chance to adapt and change course, or reorient their action. And so the impact would be less severe over a short period of time. So what is happening is that the pace at which we're disrupting these natural cycles is really important, critical to understand here. So we call this actually the great acceleration. You see all these graphs are a different example of where there's an exponential curve of all kinds of consumption, production habit, and then it start affecting the healthiness of the system in all kinds of different ways. And remember, sustainability means to continue within the cycle of the natural biosphere's capacity to sustain life forms over a long period of time. And so now what we're doing collectively, obviously, as nobody has power over what is happening, although there's a lot of problem relating to concentration of power, which is also part of the dynamic we need to address here, is that part of a solid ecosystem is you have diversity of intent as well. Another way to look at this is through that diagram, which is a sort of visual representation of planetary boundary view of macroeconomics. And I describe this as a model view of current reality at the level of the globe. So it gives us an insight, a really like clear insight. Oh, these are like system conditions are being compromised as we've overshoot the ecological ceilings. It's another way of framing this. And at the same time, there's a lot of shortfalls in terms of social foundation, where people don't have peace and justice and gender equality, housing, energy, water shortage, and so on. So it's a multifaceted problem, and there's multiple types of solution that will need to be generated in order to tackle these systemic issues. Okay, so how we define success within this framework is by framing it as sustainability principles, SPs. Okay, so success is defined in the opposite way here, is that we're going to be successful when we are not systematically increasing concentration of substance extracted from the Earth's crust, concentration of substance produced by society, and degradation by physical means. So those three first principles have to not systematically increase. So that is how we define success. And I'll explain to you how we use them later. Now, the fourth one is about building capacity for social means, so people can meet their individual needs and collective needs without compromising the first three principles. And how we do that? By empowering, by engaging, by educating, by enabling capacity for people to meet their need, but also by allowing for self-organization to emerge. And that's where these 8 principles come into play. I won't have much time to go deep into them, but have a read, maybe do some research about them if you're interested. But those principles were discerned by observing groups over long periods of time who've been successful at managing their commons. And so that's kind of what we need to do. Find better ways to manage our commons at the level of the globe, which is quite unprecedented, like, if you will, at this point in time in evolution, that we had to manage commons at the level of the globe. So that's what we're doing with the Paris Agreement. That's what we're going to keep doing with finding new ways of negotiating our way forward between nations, between groups, between cultures, so we can actually sustain our livelihood at the level of the globe now, right? That's where we're at. Framing the challenge. So I've talked about backcasting. Basically, what we do is we look at those principles and our intent as an organization or as an individual, and we define these as our vision, where we want to go, where we're heading forward. And from that vision and from those principles, we look at today's reality and assess what is happening in the system in order to find what it critically needs to be addressed. What is urgent, what is important, what is critical to be addressed, so we move towards sustainability, and we move towards what we want. We move towards what is important to us, right? And then once we do this, we create new measures, we innovate, we create all kinds of different initiatives. And as we go, we keep asking ourselves, is that the right move towards our vision, right? Is it a flexible platform? Or is it gonna lead us another corner? Or is it gonna become another dead end, like extraction of fossil fuel at that level, which eventually is gonna run out anyway? And does it improve our capacity to sustain our development? Often we refer to this as return on investment, but you can frame it in multiple different ways. Is the energy we bring in leading to more energy, to better energy source, to better rewarding or more efficient rewarding, or more beneficial output or outcomes, right? So those are the main three strategic questions we ask ourselves throughout our journey to see that we're going in the right direction. We can do this with the 4 SPs, the sustainability principles. We can do this as well with the eco-design principles. There will be different methodologies to do that, but that's the overall sort of framing here, how to do so. Backcasting from principle, looking at today's reality, moving towards where we want to go, and constantly doing so, learning as we go through constant reflective and feedback processes. Now, finally, this is how this looks when you put all the pieces together and organizing and strategizing in organizational setup, and also within teams. And you see, like, predicting, analyzing, innovating, strategizing, managing are the main sort of function here. And as we do this more and more together, the main question that I want you to focus on is, what is most strategic to do, right? So this whole process is literally to get to that question and be able to actually validate, be able to explain why this is more strategic, be able to actually come up with evidence, be able to actually not just talk that you're becoming more sustainable, but actually you know what you're talking about. You understand how the system functions and how you can better operate within the system's condition and becoming a more efficient, sustainably efficient organization, right? And this is the process flow. You can look at this. You'll have access to those slides, so you can use all of these different questions and process flow to organize your teamwork, to reflect and help you guide yourself through your process. And then I also invite you to think that maybe in terms of developing AI methodology and AI model and tools, is that each of these processes might actually benefit from these types of capacity that machine learning and analytics using algorithms can allow us to, improve on those processes. So there's a lot of room for improvement, innovation, and I think that's the whole point of this weekend, is to engage in generating new ways and new thinking for yourself, for your team, but also inspire others to do the same. Finally, I'll leave it to Monica to tell you a bit more about the collaborative space and where you can find some of that information that we've been sharing here, and also how to navigate the space and get to collaborate on tackling climate crisis together this weekend.
Thanks, Theo. Super interesting content. I think definitely worthwhile for everyone to watch. So I'll share my screen very quickly just to show you guys how can you adapt those principles and those frameworks into your project this weekend. So I'll show you guys this right now. So you should be seeing now the Miro tool, which will be the main tool used this weekend. And right now I'm zoomed in into what we will be calling your team space. So if you watched the other tutorial from our other colleague, Jason, on the YouTube channel, you would have learned how to use this. But this is where you would find all the key frameworks to adapt a few of those concepts that Theo was explaining. So the first one, if we zoom in here, you will see this backcasting diagram that Theo has explained. So here you have the ability to add notes, to reflect, and to really address those key questions, to plan towards the outcome that you want to get. So all those key questions here, you can focus on those, and you can here fill in those concepts to really truly tackle the most sustainable and strategic pathway towards your challenges. And also I want to mention that the judging criteria will also embed the true sustainability of your project. So the more you thought about this, the more you implement, the more sustainable essentially your project becomes, and it will be a reference point for the judges, where Theo actually will be one of our judges. So you guys better watch out. On the right-hand side, you'll also see deeper analysis where those 4 sustainability principles are put in here. So feel free to use this table the way that is appropriate for your challenge. So there's a few issues or examples here that we put in here for you guys, but feel free to fill it up, and you have a few references here from the slides. So this is in Miro how you can try some of those. That said, the presentation will be available to use if you want to dig deeper and use other concepts. Definitely we can do so. So yeah, I think, Theo, you had even more deeper concepts to bring, but I guess those are more if some people are brave enough to venture in a deeper sustainable approach for the advanced minds.
Yeah, so in the deck of slide, we won't cover this right now, but you'll have access to the deck of slide. I've provided example, I've given some resources as well if you want to dig deeper in terms of understanding what framework exists out there, what different example of also businesses using AI to tackle energy storage issues, or finding new ways to develop energy system. Another thing is also understanding the different frameworks that exist in terms of assessment and science-based targets for CO2 emissions and emissions in general. So yeah, there's all these different examples, I think, and some of you might be aware of them, but I just give them as an example for you to investigate further and help you throughout your journey, and of coming with your solution and framing your challenge and your model. And will be available throughout the weekend. So if you have any questions and you want to investigate it a bit further or run a mentor session, we'll be there to help you doing that. And we're here to support you succeed in this endeavor. And we're happy to be partnering with you in this journey.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much for the insights, Theo. And we'll be monitoring your team space boards, see how you guys are applying those canvases, and add in a few tips, tricks, and advice, and you can ask us questions. So good luck, guys, and see you at the hackathon.
Yeah, have a good time, have fun, and we'll be part of it too. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Yes, thanks. See ya.